It's like a military battle meets world's wildest police videos. Hey everyone, Templar74 here with another video, and today's video is going to be my review on the latest episode of Sword Art Alternative Gun Gale Online, episode 11, Psycho Lyn. And this episode, what can I say about this episode? This episode was just so out there, so random, so nuts. I found myself laughing through most of the episode with just how crazy and bizarre this episode was. And I think what I said at the beginning of the episode pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. It's a military battle meets world's wildest police videos. But we'll talk about all that in just a minute. Without further ado, let's talk about the actual episode. So the episode starts off where we left off last week with MMTM trying to eliminate what's left of PM4 in the cabin. And of course, we see Pitou emerge from the wall, from the smoke, and she's got the photon sword in her hand. But when the smoke clears out, we get a surprise. Pitou has the photon sword in one hand, and in the other hand, a chunk of M's shield. So apparently, during the battle with Shink, before Pitou got shot, M managed to get a chunk of the shield, pick it up, put it in his bag, and run off with it before, of course, Pitou got shot. Again, how that happened, I have no idea, but it happened. So, yeah, we'll just go with it. It's the first random thing of this episode. But the other crazy part and the other surprising part, at least for me, was I thought for sure in last week's episode when we heard the plasma grenade go off, I thought for sure M was dead. But he's not. He's alive, and we learn this after Pitou eliminates MMTM, which she does with the photon sword. Two of the guys are actually standing behind one another and actually manage to stop her from lopping their heads off by grabbing the sword midair. And Pitou, of course, reveals the photon sword second blade, drives it into their heads, then lops their heads off, thus killing them and eliminating MMTM. So Lyn is watching this through her spyglass. She's watching this through the window, and Eva and Fuka are trying to talk to her, but Lyn's not answering until finally she mutters out, Pitou just killed MMTM. She killed them all six of them. And this is to Fuka and Fuka and Eva, rather, disbelief. They're like, what? And Lyn is just going into panic mode. She's like, I gotta stop that monster? That monster? I gotta have a plan. Plan. But Lyn stutters for too long. She tenses up. She doesn't know what to do. So finally, Eva takes it upon herself to break Shink's team up with LF and leads Shink right into a full frontal assault, although Lyn reminds them that that is suicidal. And so with Shink charging in, Fuka just decides, you know what, we're not doing any good just standing here. I'm going to go in and go after him too. And Lyn's like, wait, but before she can talk Fuka out of it, she learns that Fuka had tied one of her boots to her grenade launcher, keeping her from going anywhere. And Fuka says, if you can undo those knots, you're the king of the world, and takes off, much like Shink did, into battle. So now we see these two different fronts on the cabin. We see M and Pitou, and their plan now is they're just going to thin out the numbers. There's only 4 teams left, LF, Shink, this other team, and them. So they're going to thin out the numbers a little bit. So M is out there. He's sniping at Shink. And he actually eliminates Shink. They're all dead. And not before one final, how should I say this, dramatic standoff between Eva and M. But, of course, M gets the last laugh. And Pitou's out there. She's trying to shoot Fuka, but can't because she's so small. But eventually, we see that Pitou did manage to, of course, shoot off both of Fuka's legs and her arms, thus leaving her immobilized. Can't do anything. But Pitou's surprised because she's sitting there going after Lyn's teammate, and Lyn isn't showing up. And this kind of astonishes and makes uneasy both Pitou and M. And finally, Lyn, who's out there trying to get herself free, just cuts her shoelaces off with her knife and charges in. And this goes noticed by Pitou, but what's surprising to her is Lyn is just taking off. She's not going after Fuka. She's not going to save her teammate. She's not going in to kill Pitou. She's just running off in the distance. And M asks Pitou, what should we do? We should finish off Fuka. And Pitou's like, no, we're going after Lyn. And after a little bit of a debate, M's like, well, how do you intend to do that? She runs as fast as a car. And, of course, at the word runs as fast as a car, a light bulb goes off. They remember the Humvees that MMTM had brought to the cabin and just left sitting there. So M and Pito take off in one of the Humvees after Lynn. And we actually see a very interesting comment made by Pito. She says, I've killed people in this game with grenades, guns, swords, but I haven't run anyone over with a car. And that's essentially their plan to kill Lynn, is they're going to run her over with a car. But Lynn does something completely crazy. She plays chicken and actually tricks M into driving the Humvee off a ravine and into the water. And Lynn is like, okay, M just crashed the Humvee. They're dead. I win. She looks down and she's like, uh-oh. It was just shallow water, and we actually see the Humvee doing donuts out in the water. And yeah, so Lynn is back on the run. She's running, and the Humvee's coming after her, and Pito's trying to kill her from the Humvee. And eventually, they manage to corner Lynn. They got her in the water, her gun's away from her. They're about ready to kill her, and before Lynn dies, they're in the water. Out of nowhere, she starts shooting up in the air, and Pito's like, what is she doing? Because at first Lynn was just going to surrender, and of course P-Chan animates, comes to life, convinces her not to. So now Lynn's shooting up in the air, much to the crazy astonishment of Pito and M, but of course she did have a purpose behind it. What she was doing was she was signaling Fuka, who's now launching a grenade at the Humvee. And so, yeah, Pito and M finally learned the fault of their strategy. They should have finished Fuka off. They didn't. Now her legs and arms have reanimated. She's come up with another Humvee, blasts them, and M's like, she's going to ram us. And instead of ramming them, Fuka gets in between them, picks up Lynn, and they take off in the Humvee. And the episode is pretty much this. It's a car chase. We got Fuka driving one Humvee, M driving the other, and they're basically running after one another, trying to shoot one another. It's a duel with automobiles, essentially. And finally, towards the end of the episode, both of the vehicles run out of gas. So their last bit of hope is just to ram one another. And that's essentially where the episode leaves off, are these two Humvees getting essentially to ram one another. And that's the episode with Lynn staring down Pito. And yeah, that was the episode. So that was the episode overall, but we did learn something else very astonishing during this whole craziness of an episode. And since it's a craziness of an episode, why not a craziness of a review? So as we saw Lynn there cornered, she's laying in the water, and M is actually trying to talk Pito into letting him drive closer so that Pito can finish her off. And Pito said, I can kill her from here. I can shoot from here. And then Pito reveals something astonishing. And this was probably the most astonishing part of the episode. We actually see Pito admit that she's afraid of dying. She's afraid of Lynn. Pito says, Lynn creeps me out. I'm afraid of her. And I'm afraid she's going to kill me if I get too close. And that's why Pito didn't want to confront Lynn head on right there, is because she's afraid to die. She's afraid of Lynn. Lynn scares her. And then we actually hear M say, well, why don't you finish her off? And Pito says, what do you think I am, a monster? And I sat there and listened to that. I'm like, well, you massacred 25 players in 2 seconds. You wiped out MMTM by lopping their heads off with a photon sword. You need a guy in the face. Yeah, woman, I'd say you're a little bit out there. You're a little bit crazy. You're a little bit of a monster. But yeah, that was probably the strangest part of the episode, and probably one of those episodes where you're like, what the? Do you not realize how crazy you are, Pito? But yeah, that's essentially everything from this week's episode. Like I said, it was a random episode. It was a crazy episode. I was laughing with just the randomness of this episode, because we go from a sword fight to a gunfight. We go from a gunfight to a car chase. We go from a car chase to essentially playing chicken and a duel with an automobile. And then we hear Pito say she's not a monster and that she's afraid of Lynn. I'm like, this episode, what didn't this episode do? It was just so random. And normally random episodes, the rule is they're not good episodes, but this was definitely an exception. Getting back to reviewing the actual episode. Overall, I give this episode an 8 out of 10. It was a great episode. I was laughing my head off. It was great. It was a great insight into just what is going on in Pete Huey's head. And about the only thing that set this episode back to where I couldn't give it a higher score was the fact that the showdown between Pito and Lynn left off on a cliffhanger. So those were my thoughts about this week's episode. But as always, everybody, in the comments section down below, let me know what you guys thought of this week's episode. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was just there? What were your thoughts on the whole going from swords to guns to cars? What were your thoughts on this episode overall? What was your favorite part? What made you laugh the most, if any? Just let me know what your guys' thoughts were about all this in the comments section down below, because as always, I enjoy hearing from you. Alright everyone, as always, Templar74 signing off. Have a great day everybody, and I'll talk to you all next time. Goodbye everybody.